The first time the fabric of my reality tore was not with a scream or a slammed door, but with the innocent high-pitched voice of my 6-year-old daughter. We were nestled at our weathered oak kitchen table, a familiar scene of domestic tranquility. The scent of baking apples and cinnamon from a forgotten pie lingered in the air. Spread before us were the pages of our bank statements, which I was cross-referencing with my meticulous budget ledger. A final check before our long-awaited meeting with the financial advisor to secure the loan for our dream. Lily, swinging her legs under her chair, was playing her version of I Spy, pointing at random numbers and asking what they meant. Then her small, sticky finger, still bearing the evidence of a strawberry jam sandwich, landed not on a digit but on a name. I spy a secret name, Mommy, she chirped, her brow furrowed in concentration. Iisquez. That's a funny name. The world did not slow down, it simply stopped. The hum of the refrigerator faded into a distant void. My gaze locked onto the line item. Asterisk transferred to Iisquez. $2,400. Memo. Property Management Unit 34B. Asterisk. A coldness, sharp and immediate, spread from the base of my spine to the tips of my fingers. Property management. David's domain. He managed a single rental property, a modest duplex left to him by a great-uncle. For years he'd referred to it as the money pit, or more optimistically, the annuity. The tenant, he'd always told me, was an elderly retired classics professor named Arthur who paid a below-market rent that just barely covered the mortgage and upkeep. $2,400 a month did not sound like barely covering. It sounded like a lie, meticulously maintained and repeated for years. Must be a computer code, sweetheart, I said, my voice unnaturally bright and thin like a wire about to snap. You know how banks have silly names for things sometimes. But Lily, blessed with the terrifying, unwavering logic of a child, was already thumbing through the previous month's statements with a detective's seal. No, it's every month. Look, Mommy. August, July, June. Her tiny finger jabbed at each identical line. A relentless, mechanical heartbeat of financial deception. 12 months. $28,800. Every year. The numbers swam before my eyes. Our dream, the leap year, a 12-month sabbatical sailing the Mediterranean, began to crumble before me. We were both architects, masters at designing beautiful, impossible futures for our clients while our own lives were confined to the grim reality of deadlines, mortgages, and student loans. The Horizon Fund was our sacred covenant, our rebellion against a life of quiet desperation. For 7 years we had lived in a state of self-imposed austerity. I drove a car with a persistent check engine light, patching the exhaust with special tape every few months. David's good suit was 8 years old and growing shiny at the elbows. Our vacations were camping trips in the state park 40 minutes away. Every dollar saved was a brick in the seawall that would protect our year of freedom. We had just passed $178,000. We were so close I could taste the salt spray. And now I saw a massive hidden fissure in that wall, and a torrent of lies was gushing through. Confrontation was my first instinct. To call him, to scream, to demand an explanation. But a deeper, more primal instinct, self-preservation, told me to be silent. To be smart. This was the lie I could see what others lay buried. I needed evidence. I needed a plan. The next day I called in sick to work, a novel feeling of deceit twisting in my own gut. My hands shook as I dialed the bank. Using information only a wife would know. His mother's maiden name, Peabody, the name of his first childhood dog, Buster. I impersonated him, layering my voice with a convincing mask of bureaucratic frustration. Yes, hello, this is David Ross. I'm hoping you can help me. We seem to have missed the year-end tax documents for one of our properties, the duplex, Unit 34B. I just need to verify the mailing address on file to see if there was a postal error. The bank clerk, after a pause filled with the clacking of a keyboard, recited an address that turned the ice in my veins to solid permafrost. It wasn't the address of a modest duplex. It was an apartment number in the Aquarelle, a shimmering glass and steel testament to luxury in the most expensive zip code in the city. An address far beyond the means of any semi-retired professor. The room tilted. I ended the call and sat on the floor of my home office, my back against the wall, trying to remember how to breathe. This wasn't a simple oversight. This was a parallel life. I spent the next hour researching private investigators, finally settling on a firm with stellar, discreet reviews. Martin, the investigator assigned to me, was a man in his late 50s with a voice that sounded like gravel and a calm, non-judgmental demeanor that I clung to like a lifeline. "I need to know who this woman is," I told him, my voice barely a whisper over the phone. "I need to know what my husband is doing there." "Infidelity is usually straightforward, Mrs. Ross," Martin rumbled. "We follow the money, we find the secret. We'll have answers for you soon." The 3 days that followed were an exercise in surreal agony. I had to perform the role of Chloe Ross, loving wife and mother, while feeling like a ghost in my own life. I made David's favorite meatloaf, listened to him talk about a new downtown project, helped Lily build a Lego castle. All while the image of that downtown address burned in my mind. Every smile I gave him felt like a betrayal of myself. Every touch of his hand sent a jolt of revulsion through me. I was an actress in a play about my own destruction, and the curtain was about to fall. Martin's report arrived via a secure email link on the morning of the 4th day. The attached photographs were high-resolution, brutally clinical in their clarity. There was David, exiting the elevator in the Aquarel's opulent, marble-lined lobby. He wasn't slinking or hiding. He was relaxed, smiling. He held the hand of a little girl, 4 or 5 years old, with a cascade of dark curling hair that was so like his own it stole the air from my lungs. Walking beside them, her hand resting lightly on his arm, was a stunningly beautiful woman. Elena Vasquez. She was laughing at something he said, her head thrown back in a gesture of easy, intimate joy. This was no seedy motel affair. This was a second life. Second family. Complete, whole, and funded by our dream. The report was a cold, factual obituary for my marriage. Elena Vasquez, 34. Interior designer. Daughter Sophia Ross, 5. They had resided at that address for 5 years. David's pattern was consistent. 3 to 4 evenings a week and every other Sunday like clockwork. 5 years. The number echoed in the hollowed-out cavern of my chest. He had been living this lie for almost the entire duration of our daughter's life. While I was painstakingly reconciling grocery receipts and darning socks, he was financing a penthouse existence. The $2,400 wasn't for property management. It was rent. It was child support. It was the cost of his double life. That evening I felt a terrifying calm settle over me. I put Lily to bed early, reading her extra stories and holding her a little too tight. I then took the printed photographs from Martin's report and laid them out on the coffee table in the living room, arranging them like evidence for a jury of one. I heard his key in the door, his familiar whistle as he hung up his coat. He walked into the living room, his smile warm and unsuspecting. "Hey honey, what's?" His words died in his throat. His eyes scanned the photos, then darted to me, then back to the photos. The color drained from his face so completely he looked like a sepia photograph. He didn't speak. He didn't try to grab them. He simply sank onto the sofa opposite me, his body collapsing in on itself as the entire intricate architecture of his deception crumbled into dust. The confession that followed was a torrent of clichés, made horrifyingly unique by the sheer scale of the betrayal. Elena was his first love from college. Their relationship was a whirlwind of passion and drama that ended when she left for a prestigious design internship in Milan. A year after we were married, their paths crossed again at an architecture conference. Old flames, fueled by nostalgia and wine, reignited. A mistake. A lapse in judgment. A one-time thing. Then 9 months later the phone call. "Baby. A daughter. His daughter." "I was trapped, Chloe," he sobbed, his body racked with heaves, tears streaming down his face and soaking into his shirt. "What was I supposed to do? Abandon my own child? She's my flesh and blood. You're so strong, so capable. You would have made me choose. You would have given me an ultimatum. And how could I choose between my daughters?" His words were meant to evoke sympathy, to share the burden of his impossible choice. Instead, they ignited a cold, pure fury within me. "You did choose, David," I said, my voice low and steady, devoid of the hysteria he perhaps expected. "You chose to lie to me every single day for 5 years. You chose to look me in the eye and talk about our future while you were stealing from it. You chose to let me live in a fantasy all the while you were building a reality with someone else. You didn't choose between children. You chose the coward's path of deception." You chose to have it all, and in doing so you risked losing everything. I stood up. The calm was breaking and the anger was beginning to seep through. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed Lily. You made her sacrifices. The summer camps she didn't go to, the new clothes she did without, meaningless. You made a fool of me. I walked to the hall closet, pulled out a suitcase and began to pack. Methodically. Coldly. He followed me, pleading, crying, grabbing at my arms. His touch felt like a brand. I shook him off. Don't, I spat. Don't you dare touch me. I woke a sleepy, confused Lily, bundled her into the car with her favorite blanket and stuffed owl, and drove to my sister's house. The familiar streets of our neighborhood looked alien, sinister, as if I were seeing them for the first time. The following weeks were a numb blur of legal consultations and painful explanations. My sister, Sarah, was my rock, taking care of Lily while I navigated the nightmare. David oscillated wildly between phases. He was a penitent beggar, leaving voicemails filled with tearful apologies and promises to end it all, to go to counseling, to do anything to save our family. Then he would morph into an angry victim, accusing me of being cold, unfeeling, of not understanding the pressure he was under. Finally, he would become despairing, sending long, rambling emails about the black hole of his existence. Through it all, one image was seared into my brain. His easy, unguarded laugh in that marble lobby. A laugh of unburdened joy that I hadn't seen him direct at me in years. That was the memory that kept me from answering his calls. My lawyer, Gwendolyn Price, was a revelation. A woman in her 60s with a steely gray bob and a reputation for forensic financial discovery that struck fear into the hearts of opposing counsel, she became my general in this war I never wanted to fight. "We need the full picture, Chloe," she said at our first meeting, her voice leaving no room for argument. "We can't negotiate from a place of ignorance. We need to know her financials. Everything. We need to know if that $2,400 was just the tip of the iceberg." Gwen filed a series of aggressive motions, subpoenaing Elena Vasquez's bank records, credit card statements, business licenses and property deeds. The wait for the documents was another form of torture. What new horror would they reveal? A secret credit card? A love nest in the Bahamas? What we finally received was not what anyone expected. The documents painted a picture of a woman who was not a dependent mistress, but a formidable and successful entrepreneur. Elena Vasquez's interior design firm, Vasquez Design, was thriving, regularly featured in luxury lifestyle magazines. The Aquarelle apartment was deeded solely in her name, purchased in a single all-cash transaction 5 years prior. There were no mortgages, no liens. And the monthly $2,400 payments from David? They weren't being spent on designer handbags or luxury groceries. Our forensic accountant traced them. Every single payment, on the same day it was received, was being automatically transferred into a high-yield investment account at a prestigious wealth management firm. An account solely in the name of Sofia Vasquez Ross. Elena wasn't just a mistress, she was a pragmatist and a strategist. She wasn't spending the money, she was banking it. She was using my husband, the successful architect, to fund her daughter's future trust fund, turning his guilt and deception into a rock-solid financial portfolio. The revelation was so bizarre, so coldly calculated, that it momentarily overshadowed the raw pain of betrayal. It reframed everything. Gwen, sensing a seismic shift in the dynamics, did something unorthodox. She reached out to Elena's lawyer and proposed a meeting. I found myself sitting across from Elena Vasquez in a sterile, neutral conference room in Gwen's law firm. She was even more striking in person, poised and elegant in a tailored cream-colored suit. She looked at me not with guilt or triumph, but with a weary, almost professional defiance. She spoke first. "I imagine you hate me," she began, her voice calm and measured. "I want you to know that was never my intention. I didn't set out to destroy your marriage." She then proceeded to tell me a story that was a perfect funhouse mirror image of my own. When she told David she was pregnant, he had insisted on providing support. But the man he presented to her was a fiction. He painted a picture of himself as a wildly successful architect, a partner at his firm for whom money was no object. He described his wife, me, as a simple, sweet woman disinterested in finances, content with her garden and her child, who preferred a life of quiet, modest comfort and was happy to leave the complicated money matters to him. He said this was his way of being a father to Sophia, she explained, her gaze steady. His way of providing her with security and opportunities without disrupting the balanced life he had built with you. He made it sound like a generous, noble arrangement. I thought I was accepting child support from a wealthy man who wanted to do right by his child, not siphoning the lifeblood from your family's dream. The narrative he had sold her was a masterpiece of manipulation. He was the hero in both of our stories. The generous provider to her, the frugal family man to me. The monster in the middle, the pathetic, desperate man trying to hold two collapsing worlds together, was the real David. But the final, most crushing twist was still lurking in the paperwork. As Gwen's team delved deeper, a tiny, almost insignificant discrepancy was found. David's life insurance policy, taken out a year before we were married, still listed his mother and Elena Vasquez as the primary beneficiaries. He had never changed it. A simple, devastating oversight. Gwen, a bloodhound on the scent, seized upon it. If he was so committed to this second family, so certain of his paternity, let's get absolute certainty, she said, her eyes glinting. She demanded a court-ordered paternity test. David fought it with a panic that seemed disproportionate even for the situation. He called it a humiliating indignity, a violation of his bond with his daughter. His vehement resistance only hardened Gwen's resolve. She argued to the judge that it was a crucial matter of financial and parental responsibility. The order was granted. The 2 weeks we waited for the results were the longest of my life. The air was thick with unspoken dread. David stopped calling entirely. I was in Gwen's impossibly tidy office, staring at a bleak abstract painting that seemed to symbolize the chaos of my life, when she finally entered. She didn't speak. She simply placed a single sheet of paper on the polished desk in front of me and pointed to the bottom line. The words were printed in a stark, bureaucratic font. Probability of paternity, 0%. I read it once. Then again. A strange, soundless laugh bubbled up in my throat. It was all so absurd. So grotesquely, horrifyingly funny. 5 years. $144,000. The lies, the second life, the destruction of our marriage, the devastation of our dream. All of it. For nothing. For a child that wasn't even his. The story unraveled with brutal efficiency after that. Under the threat of perjury and financial repercussions, Elena confessed the full truth. Before reconnecting with David, she had an intense, short-lived affair with a married Italian industrialist. When she discovered she was pregnant, he disappeared, cutting off all contact. Reconnecting with David, her first love, so soon after felt like fate. He was successful, kind, and, crucially, racked with guilt over their past breakup. He was eager to do the right thing. She saw a solution. She let him believe the child was his. It was the perfect, cruelest con. And David, the architect of fictions, had been its most gullible victim. The meeting where Gwen and I presented David with the paternity results and Elena's sworn affidavit was the most harrowing moment of the entire ordeal. It wasn't just anger that contorted his features. It was a complete and total psychological disintegration. The two families he had so carefully juggled, the two identities he had maintained, the devoted father of 2 daughters, were both revealed as elaborate fictions. The child he loved and supported wasn't his. The woman he thought he was providing for had played him for a fool from the very beginning. And the wife he had betrayed was now watching him crumble, her expression not of vengeance, but of a profound, devastating pity that was far, far worse. He was utterly, completely, and desolately alone. The divorce proceedings after that became a grim formality. David, a hollowed-out shell, signed the settlement papers without a word of protest. He agreed to terms that were overwhelmingly in my favor, granting me the house, primary custody of Lily, and the vast majority of our remaining assets, including the gutted remains of the Horizon Fund. It wasn't a victory, it was a salvage operation. He resigned from his firm a week later. The last I heard, he had moved to a small, rain-soaked town in the Pacific Northwest, a place with no history, no memories, and no connection to the ocean he had promised to sail with me. I used the money to buy a house. Not a sailboat, but a solid, century-old craftsman cottage on the outskirts of the city. It had a wide, welcoming porch, a large, untamed garden for Lily to explore, and a sense of permanent, grounded truth. It was the absolute antithesis of our old dream, It was rooted, heavy, and unmistakably real. The money from Elena? It was gone. The trust fund for Sophia, built on our stolen dreams, was legally hers. There was no getting it back. The $2,400 a month had bought David a fantasy, and it had cost us our future. Sometimes, in the deep, quiet hush of the evening after Lily is asleep, I sit on that porch with a cup of tea. I don't think about the Mediterranean. I don't dream of foreign coasts. I think about the stories we tell ourselves to survive. I think about the man I loved, the man who was so skilled at drawing beautiful lies that he eventually became trapped inside them. He built two intricate, perfect worlds, and in the end he was left homeless, exiled from both. I got the house. I got my daughter. I got the truth. But the cost was a fundamental piece of my soul. A loss of innocence, a shattering of trust that no amount of money can ever restore. The horizon is still there, but now I know it's just a line. What lies beyond it is no longer a dream. It's simply an unknown, and I've learned to be okay with that. The greatest journey now is the one that happens within these four walls, in this garden, on this solid, unshakable ground.